The transition to the NBA as a young prospect is one that varies greatly case to case, with some players being built for the big leagues from the jump, and others needing a few years to get situated and find their footing against this level of competition. Sure, it can be frustrating when the highly touted lottery pick doesn't hit the ground running for your favorite team that drafted him, but patience is one of the most important things that you can have with young players, and it's something that a lot of people just seem not to have. This brings us to the topic of today's video, where we'll be talking about 7 players in particular that came into the league with a good amount of hype and expectations, but to this point haven't exactly played up to it, and I'm going to be explaining why, despite this, you shouldn't give up on them quite yet. Before we get started though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first struggling young player we'll be discussing is Neal Akina of the New York Knicks, and here's why you shouldn't give up on him quite yet. Neal Akina came into the NBA 3 years ago, and right off the bat, he showed off his defensive prowess and a far advanced understanding of the defensive side of basketball, using his terrific length, lateral quickness, and IQ to be a big-time disruptor on the perimeter and make plays. However, his offensive game through 3 years has shown minimal, if any, improvement, and that's a problem, because it hasn't really ever been that good to begin with. The thing that bugs me about this situation, though, is that the Knicks as an organization, from top to bottom, have been nothing short of dysfunctional during his tenure with the team, and while most other teams at the bottom of the standings prioritized the development of their young players, the Knicks have done the opposite. They have held on to unrealistic fantasies about potential playoff berths, and as a result, have signed too many mediocre veterans to play ahead of their young players like Neal Akina, and as a result, he's been in and out of the rotation with his minutes never being very consistent. The Knicks did exercise their team option for the 4th year of his contract, but if the Knicks still can't find a way to utilize his elite defensive potential consistently, then I think he'll leave in free agency next summer and find a team that will. The next struggling young player up for discussion is Markelle Fultz of the Orlando Magic. Fultz's name will likely always go down in infamy, barring a major change of events, but even if that's the case, it still doesn't mean he's a bust. The player that the Philadelphia 76ers thought they were drafting and the player they got were two completely different versions of himself, and the reason for this was a pretty rare shoulder ailment that is still hampering his play to this day. Now, in Orlando, he's getting a change of scenery and fresh start that he desperately needed, and even though his production isn't anything special right now, he has shown some promising glimpses. He averaged 12 points and 5 assists per game this season, while shooting 47% from the field, all of which is pretty decent, but the fact that he's still only shooting 25% from 3 tells me his shoulder is still a problem, and it won't be going away anytime soon. He more than likely won't ever be the shooter that he was in college, so now he just has to work with what he can work with, and the fact that he's still willing to take almost 2 threes per game tells me he'll be able to work his way into a decent percentage over time as long as he keeps working. He may never be a comfortable shooter, but the fact that he's a strong finisher at the basket, an elusive ball handler, and a crafty scorer in the mid-range will all be able to make up for it, and he can still become a very good all-around player. The next struggling young player up for discussion is Dennis Smith Jr. of the New York Knicks. Smith Jr. began his career tantalizing fans with his top-tier athleticism and hops, throwing down unbelievable dunks, and even posting respectable stat lines on a regular basis. He averaged 15 points as a rookie, then in his second season, he got traded from New York to Dallas and averaged 14 points, but this year, he's only averaging a measly 5 points per game on pretty awful efficiency, which has led many reasonably to be questioning his future in the league. Now, by no means am I justifying his poor play on the court, but full perspective and context needs to be applied to this situation. For one, his stepmother that raised him his entire life died very early on in the season, so mentally he must have been going through a lot, and additionally, he's been struggling with injuries, so again, those are 2 big things that haven't exactly made things easy on him. Additionally, as I mentioned with Neal Akina, the Knicks have just been a mess in general, and being in that environment hasn't exactly helped him at all either. He showed that he could be a productive player in the league early on, and I still believe that once he gets back in the right state of mind, as well as when he returns to full health, he'll be a good player for the long run. The next struggling young player up for discussion is Michael Porter Jr. of the Denver Nuggets. Porter has been in the spotlight of the basketball world since high school, and at the time, he was seen as a bona fide can't-miss future star. However, as we see time and time again in situations like this, injuries can be killer, and that's exactly what happened here. 2 minutes into his college career, he suffered a pretty serious back injury. He then rushed back to try to boost his draft stock in March Madness, but all that did was show how much the injury actually affected his game. After being seen as a top 3 at minimum pick, he slipped all the way to the end of the lottery on draft night, and he also had a back surgery that held him out of his entire first season. Back injuries are something very serious for basketball players, and for good reason people have been skeptical of Porter, but in his return this year, he looked very good in spurts. The Nuggets still haven't put him into big minutes or forced him to do a lot, but in 14 minutes per game, he averaged 7.5 points and shot the ball very well, making about 50% of his shots and 42% of his threes. Obviously, this sample size is small, but at his best, he was an incredible scorer, and if his health returns to full capacity, then the Nuggets very well might have gotten an explosive scorer at their disposal as a result of taking a chance on him. The next struggling young player up for discussion is Zack Collins of the Portland Trail Blazers. Collins has become the forgotten lottery pick from the 2017 NBA draft because his play style isn't very flashy and he hasn't necessarily done much to this point, but this was the year where he was finally going to embrace a bigger role in the rotation and show what he could do. He started well, but after just 3 games he suffered a shoulder injury that held him out for the entire rest of the season to this point, but now with the season having been delayed so long, he's gotten back healthy and we'll see him back in action when play resumes. Collins is a strong defensive big man, has capable range on his jumper out to the 3-point line, is solid in the post, and has soft touch around the basket. Nothing he does jumps out at you, but he's pretty good in a lot of areas, and for a Trailblazers team that will be looking to make a surge to the playoffs, they'll be welcoming him back to the rotation with open arms. As long as he stays healthy throughout his career, he'll be a very valuable player to whoever team he plays for, so giving up on him now would just be foolish. The next struggling young player up for discussion is Moe Bamba of the Orlando Magic. Bamba is the kind of prospect that's just oozing with potential, but his performances on the court just haven't come anywhere close to expectations. At the time of the draft, he was seen as someone with Rudy Gobert-type ability as a rim protector, but offensively, he was very much a work in progress. In reality, he still needs a lot of work on both ends, with a lot of his mistakes on defense being both mental and due to the fact that he's still very skinny, and offensively, he's just not developed enough skill-wise. The Magic have also taken a big leap as a team since he joined, so while most project-type players play for rebuilding teams, Bamba's been forced into a playoff contender, and expectations for players on teams like this are a lot higher. He's only averaging 6 points and 5 rebounds per game through 2 years, but he is blocking about a shot and a half per game, and while he isn't close to being the dominant force that many thought he could be when he got drafted, he still has a long career ahead of him, so I wouldn't be giving up on him by any means. And finally, the last struggling young player we'll be discussing in this video is Josh Jackson of the Memphis Grizzlies. Jackson was a top 3 pick in a loaded 2017 NBA draft, and while a lot of those chosen around him are becoming very good players, he's had a much rockier path. In each of his first 2 seasons in Phoenix, he went through a cycle where in the first half of the season he would struggle immensely, then in the second half of the season he would turn it on and play well, only for it to be too late because the team is realistically out of the competition. This year, when he got traded to Memphis, he played most of the season in the G League in order to play consistent minutes and essentially earn his place. He's had a few off-of-the-court problems that certainly don't help much with the fact that he's been a bit of a disappointment on the court too, but despite all of this, he still has shown some glimmers of promise and can be a very serviceable two-way player. Despite the inconsistencies, he's averaged double-digit points every season. He's not that good of a shooter from 3, but overall he is a decent scorer. He's capable of playing some solid and versatile defense, and most importantly, the Grizzlies have been reportedly very pleased with his growth as a person off the court. If he can stay out of trouble and keep his focus on playing basketball and improving, then he has all of the tools needed to become a productive wing player in the league, and he's definitely played like it in spurts. It's just the consistency that needs to be there more often from him. I think getting traded was a much needed wake-up call for him, and he's responded to it in a positive way, so I do believe he still has a lot to give to a team in the league. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below any other struggling young players you still don't want to give up on. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.